So even in the Zoom software, we have the AI companion now.
What do you say, Saga?
There is an AI companion I see here.
Ah,
What does it do?
okay.
Summary, ask leading questions. Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
okay. Let me just 1 second.
Ask leading questions.
Okay. Okay, it's already 7:06, so may we start now? Okay. So hello everyone. I hope that you hear me well. Okay. So today is the fifth Indo-Pacific online youth gathering, and today it is our honor to have Ellie Bowe from Canberra, Australia. So just a little bit of bio from Ellie. Ellie is a young theosophist based in Australia, and she's currently undertaking a Master of Research in Education at university. So her work is grounded in a deep interest in holistic pedagogies and the ways teachers and students co-construct meaning within the classroom. So through both her studies and her spiritual path, she is drawn to the symbolic and transformative dimensions of education, where inner and outer learning intersects. So today, her talk, Schools Within Schools, reflects her ongoing exploration of how formal schooling can mirror the broader lessons of life itself. So please join me to welcome Ellie. And Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Leo. And yeah, looking really forward. I've been looking forward to being here with you all today. And thank you so much for having me. As well, if throughout when I'm speaking, if there's anything, if you have a question or you'd like to add something, please do. I can only see some people. So if I'm speaking and not seeing you, just, I don't know, start talking over the top of me or something. But yeah, I guess I'll start. As well, in Australia, tomorrow we are celebrating Reconciliation Day, which is a day of our history and coming together. So I thought I would use this opportunity to do an acknowledgement of country. So I do acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people of whose land I'm speaking on, and acknowledge them as the first teachers and learners of this place as well, and extend my respect out to any Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander people here today and do acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. So, when Leo asked me to do a presentation for the Indo-Pacific Young TS gathering, I was really thinking, oh, what is it I would like to do? There's so many things that interest me, but I think even when I first started asking myself that question, I kind of already knew because I always come back to all the time in my life is the same topic, which is education. And so, as Leo said, I'm also studying education at university right now. And I've also had some wonderful opportunities to go out to schools in my city and teach. I do that through work and also through my studies. So that's been lovely too. And really be able to observe teacher-student interactions, be the teacher. Sometimes I'm in university being the student. Um, and being able to see how school curriculum is formed and the different actors and agendas that are taking an interest in education. And probably some of you, most of you, would probably be tuned into that formal schooling isn't the only type of school. And, in the TS, we have spiritual studies and esoteric studies. But even if you expand outwards more so, we often say life itself is a school, and we're all students, we're all learning lessons. And maybe that's actually why we are here on Earth, to sort of learn our lessons and do our assignments, so to speak. And yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it, education? Um, so yeah, I'm keen to discuss today. So I thought before I sort of dive in and start talking at you, I'd love if you could just pause for a moment and recall a memory from your school years. We've got people of a few different ages here, but I think we've all went to school, had teachers. So I'll give you a moment now and just when you feel ready, it'd be wonderful to sort of hear what is the memory that came to mind. And there's a couple of prompts on the screen there. What memory came up? Why do you think that particular memory? And did it have a certain focus? So yeah, please do share. And also while you're thinking, I always have one particular memory that comes to mind for me, which is it wasn't a very particularly nice memory, but I remember I was in year 7 and we had a new teacher at the school and she was teaching us. And I went to a very small school in year 7. I think there was only about 20 of us in the whole year, and she was taking the role. And we were being a bit disruptive, a bit naughty, and she was, I think, a little bit stressed. She was brand new. And about 4 names in, she kind of snapped at us all a little bit and said, I'm only 4 names in and I've got another 30 names to call. And do we want the whole class to be calling your names? And I sort of maybe a little bit cheekily said, "Oh, but there's only 20 of us here. How can you have 30 to call?" And I remember she put the paper down because back in those days you did it all on paper. Put the paper down, looked at me, glasses on, and said, "Don't think you're smart because you're not." Put her glasses that way, picked up her paper, continued on. And I remember, oh, poor little Ellie's ego just, oh, the audacity. How could she say that I'm not smart? Oh my goodness, what a terrible teacher she is. La 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 la. And I now realize, looking back at that particular moment, little year 7 Ellie thought it was all about her, but really that moment says something about me and my little ego and the way I reacted. So yeah, did anyone have something maybe similar they'd like to share or completely different or just a memory from school?
I can see there's a big silence here. That's because the memories are not so pleasant, so everyone will try to hide it so deep. So now when you try to retrieve it,
Too many unpleasant ones.
too many unpleasant ones, and you bury it deep down. Now you cannot recall it. I think that's I had quite a similar experience when I was a little kid when I went to kindergarten. And then I think the teacher, she was somehow always unhappy. And I was a little kid. And even if, I want to go to toilets, usually the teacher will escort the student to go to toilets because the kids are so small. But I was so scared of her that I didn't even dare to ask her to take me to toilets. And then I think that, a few times when she fed me, you know, as a kid, I don't like to eat. I don't like to chew. All I need is that the food went in my mouth. I would suck all the juice of the food and swallow the juice, and I'll spit out all the content of the food. And then the teacher was so angry with that one. And I remember once or twice that she actually slapped me on my hand or something, or not to do that, not to do that. I'm not really sure it's a pleasant memory, but it's just a memory that came up to me since I was a little kid. Yeah. But
So
it's back in
interesting.
Vietnam. I think this is back in Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think is touching on a couple of aspects which we're probably going to explore and talk about later is what makes a good teacher and are there aspects of the education system we could change? Yeah.
I have a short, I guess, story. I'm going through my all my detention slips from when was at school. Um,
Oh, that's so
so
funny too.
this one just summarizes. I don't know if it's the other way around, but it's repeatedly disrupting classmates and failing to respond to teacher instructions. That was a 2 hour detention. Work to be done. Prepare summary notes for states of consciousness. So yeah, it was a psychology class, but yeah, I was constantly just always looking for trouble in class and just looking for fun.
Mhm.
Um, whether that was the teacher or me or the class. Yeah, that was my biggest issue. Like I've got so many detention slips.
Look at them all.
Mm, Yeah, I
Maybe
saw
a bit
some.
of a pattern.
Those are your rewards.
Rewards. Malik raised his hands, Ellie.
Yes, Malik.
I got a story, and it's kind of like you mentioned ego. It's kind of like a reversal of like the ego of the teacher. It's quite funny. My friend it was science, right? And he was asking about something the teacher said about how electrons have no mass. She goes, electrons have no mass. And then he goes, okay, but how is there an atomic weight if there's electrons, neutrons, and protons, and they all, because they're subatomic particles, have no mass? How does the atom have a mass if the subatomic particles don't? And she goes, they just do. And then he kept on asking, we're like, okay, but like, how does it not have mass? But then anyway, the teacher ended up snapping at him and got mad at him for asking questions, and literally said to him, stop asking questions. And it was like, okay, so you can't use the defense of like school's there to learn when like you're there to ask questions, and then she literally said the words stop asking questions. I found it so funny. Like even my like year 7 self found it quite ironic. So I found that an interesting story.
Thanks so much for sharing. That's
Yeah.
very funny.
Just a little bit, like because I was born in Vietnam, and I think that the education in Vietnam back in 1990 something is quite different, maybe to Australia or something. But I remember that since I was a kid, all the way into at least secondary school and even high school, a lot of subjects that we need to memorize it by heart, even though you don't like it, and you just need to memorize it, like history or something like that. And I remember those subjects that are subject that I hated the most because there will be pages and pages of words, and you have to memorize it, and you need to read it to the teacher, or you write it down on a paper, and then they will mark it. And that's something that I don't like.
Mm.
And later on, when I grew up, when I look back at my high school, my secondary school, I don't understand the purpose of that subject. What for? Why do I need to cram into my brain all these kind of things that I will not use later in my life?
No,
Yeah.
I can resonate with that. Saga, you've got your hand up there.
It's a very interesting discussion. And of course, when you talk about memories from school, there's so many memories flash, right, in your eyes. One of the memories that I came up with, it was, I think, one of the parades we used to have during our Independence Day on 15th of August. I don't remember which year, whether I was in ninth or 11th. I don't remember that. So what happened? I was about to go to reach the school. Just before the school, I met with an accident. I don't have any memory because I think I was unconscious. I fell down, and then the next memory I have is from the hospital. And then I was just beginning to be awake, and I listened to some sounds from people talking around me, my father, my brother, and then there were a few teachers. And then I remember they were speaking that, oh, these days kids are not really responsible. He must be riding very fast. He must be riding very irresponsibly. That's all I remember. And then when I really came to my consciousness, I asked my friends who was the teacher, and then they told me who was the teacher. So next day or a few days later, I confronted the teacher. I said, uh, I don't even remember. I remember writing very carefully, but I don't remember what exactly happened because I was unconscious. So how do you make assumptions that I was responsible? So she looked at me and I said, go take your seat.
Mm. Wow, no, thank you
So
for sharing.
sometimes, as teachers, it is so important to not have assumptions.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, thank you for those insights, Saga.
Francis has his hand up.
Francis.
Oh, yes. I think we all have pretty similar negative experiences, but I can share something that's more positive that inspired me and got me to where I am today. I think that one is a really really good one. You know, like as like what Malik has shared as well. You know, there are questions that you ask the teachers that they will never ever be able to answer. And the thing is, I think during my class during my aerospace course, I did aerospace when I was like 17 or 18 years old. So we did ask the teacher, like, why would we want to learn about all this mathematics in the first place? Right? Because engineering mathematics is it's a lot. It's a lot as compared to secondary school. So the the teacher just stopped everything. And then he started to explain to us in a way that he's so passionate about it. He's like, imagine that, you know, if you have a device, I think it was about GPS. I think it was about GPS. He was giving examples like, you know, you have a GPS here, you have a device here. Do you know how does the device know where you are? And then he starts to draw diagrams about how there's the satellite over the Earth orbit, and then he starts to draw the triangles and stuff like this. Then he say, you know, if you learn all this mathematics in the future, you'll be able to design technologies like as simple as you may think that the mathematics might not make sense. You know, like all the people in your family, in your friends or relatives, they will tell you that the mathematics is just it goes to waste, right? But the thing is, as long as you learn this, you may not calculate it personally, but you will apply it through computations, right? The computers, softwares and stuff like that. You can actually do simulations and stuff. And that was when I realized that, oh my gosh, there's actually such a person that would actually stop and explain to us exactly what we asked.
Mm.
And that's why of course, when I went on to work, there was also another manager that trusts us as juniors so much that he actually gave us like the design authority to do something that is like $10 million. Right? We were just starting work. And that really got me inspired. And then when I actually went on through my career, there was like interns or younger engineers that came in and they would ask like questions that seem stupid, right? And then I would feel the sense of gratefulness and I just explained to them, right? Do you remember about this in the school? Even back to the elementary school, you have this kind of mathematics, like the basics, trigo, stuff like that. And then you can just like use this and you could just imagine something else if you want to design or develop something new.
Mm.
And that is pretty fun to talk to them because the thing is like everyone would feel like it is actually fun to work, right? And then whatever they've learned in school, it actually makes sense. And they have not wasted the years in their lives just trying to find a job with the qualification, but you actually use the knowledge.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. No, that's such a lovely and inspiring and imaginative memory there. So thank you for sharing a bit of a happy one, Francis, after our, couple of maybe not so happy memories. And I think that it's really interesting because from sort of what I'm hearing and just reflecting back, and I wasn't sure if I was going to hear this, but it doesn't surprise me that I am, that it's so many of everyone's memories that are coming up there is the teacher and the teacher's behavior and the way that they acted towards you. And that sort of sticking with you. And I've read somewhere that when people are going through dementia, that basically some of the last moments and memories they keep intact are memories of family, and the next ones are memories of teachers, teachers that they despised or hated, or teachers that they loved. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. Angelo, did you, and Saga, is your hand still up, or was that up from last time?
No, I think Rita raised.
I think that
Oh,
Rita wants
Oh,
was
Rita
before me.
raised hand.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I can't
yeah,
see. I can only see some
yeah.
people. Rita, yes. Oh, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself so we can hear you. Hmm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we sure can. Yes.
Okay. Well, I have one of the positive experiences in my schooling, and I have 3 teachers all along that I loved very much. And they were always happy, and they were listening to you. And the best one that I think of was my kindergarten teacher when I was 5 years old. And she was able to sing beautifully, play piano, and she was always happy as well. And that she became my idol to be a kindergarten teacher, which I was the next 40 years.
Wow.
And then she got ill. She was in her 80s and she got ill. So I wrote her a letter and I told her how I felt in her kindergarten and how she became my idol and how I am a kindergarten teacher now. And she got this letter, and then soon after she died, she passed away. And I thought, well, I'm glad I wrote this letter. And she had no idea that she had a student or pupil like me there admiring her until she was around 80 years old. And then she knew about somebody who really loved her. So that was my positive experience in my schooling, in short.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that such a heartwarming story, Rita. And yeah, I'm sure that would have meant so much to her to receive that letter at that time as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Angelo.
Yeah, I think that Rita's story is so touching, just because, yeah, obviously it's nice to have someone who like becomes like your inspiration. So yeah, I like that a lot. Look, in my case, I think that I have like a very bad experience and a very good experience. It's quite interesting. So I used to study in one of these schools that Leo went to, where people were very disciplined and they just wanted to, like that you repeat things by heart. And so I used to have lessons all the time. And I remember going to school almost all day and then going home to continue doing homeworks. So like, oh my God, and then I will do homeworks until like 10 p.m. at night. And then like just going to bed and then the next day again, waking up very early to go to school. So look, I got tired of that. So I became like a rebel. I said to my mom, I don't want to go to that school anymore. I was in year 9, so my mom said, okay, this guy became a teenager. Now he doesn't want to follow like the discipline. So I say to my mom, yeah, no, I'm not going there anymore. And I heard of a school that was quite good, where like the teaching model was different. So I say to my mom, look, I'm going to go to that. I want to go to that school. And she said to me, look, I have a friend there. And my friend said that there is no way for you to be able to go there because, like, like the school is full. So, and apart from that, the year had started already. So I was in year 9, and it was already like 3 months after, like from like the start of the first term. So I didn't have chance, like the chances for me to go there was very low. But I went there and I spoke to the principal of the school. And I don't know, like the guy got very good image of me or something, but he said to me, look, present an exam, and if you do well, then you can move here. And I did, and I passed the exam, and then like my life changed completely because the school, so like the school, the teaching model in this school was completely different. They will give us in the like a question that we needed to answer, and then we will go to the library to find the answer, and then we will go together to a classroom to discuss that answer, which is a very different model to just repeating by memory. So I remember that, like I love philosophy, for example, and philosophy in the another school, like where it was a lot of discipline, it was so boring, like it was just repeating, like what this philosopher said, whereas I wanted to discuss more what the philosopher said, so I got that chance in this new school. So yeah, it's almost like I will compare it like night and light, like those two experiences that I had. But yeah, it was great.
No, thank you for sharing that, Angela, and also the contrast, because as well, I think sometimes, sometimes you have to experience maybe what you don't want to know what you do want or what you do gel with as well. So yeah, it's really fascinating. I find education so fascinating, and we're going to have more chances to discuss and talk about our memories and everything too. Um, but as well, I guess the next slide, I really sort of wanted to go back and see, well, I've got certain ideas about education through, having been a student at school and my own lived experience. But what was it that the TS said about education? And so I went back here, and here we have Blavatsky. So in the Key to Theosophy, Blavatsky said, and I'll read out the quote here. I've got it here and also bolded a couple of words. So she said, if we had money, we would found schools which would turn out something else than reading and writing candidates for starvation. Children should above all be taught self-reliance, love for all men and women, altruism, mutual charity, and more than anything else, to think and reason for themselves. We would reduce the purely mechanical work of the memory to an absolute minimum and devote the time to the development and training of the inner senses, faculties, and latent capacities. We should aim at creating free men and women, free intellectually, free morally, unprejudiced in all respects, and above all things, unselfish. So I think it's really interesting that the discussion that we've just had really reflects a lot of these aspects that Blavatsky said in her own words, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, we're all sort of drawn to this for a reason. But it does kind of make you wonder, this heavy emphasis on literacy and numeracy and standardized testing that we have today. And this memorization aspect that came up in a few of you, Leah, you were talking about, you didn't like having to memorize all of this. I don't know, I do find that we do that a lot in schools. And I think, when we're thinking about it, we spend such a large proportion of our life in school. We have early childhood, primary, high school, then beyond if you want to go to university or TAFE or whatever it is. And where are the human beings learning the traits that Blavatsky has identified? And that there is, of course, some people who would be learning it from parents or books. Literature is a great way to self-educate. But I do think that it is interesting, sort of thinking about what's actually happening and what is it that we should be learning. And I'll just go on to Annie Besant as well, just moving so we can sort of half see the quotation and us. Now, she said, to the Theosophist, each child is a study, and the teacher, instead of imposing his or her own will on the child, tries to discover the indwelling owner of the body, tries to aid the indwelling ruler, not to usurp his throne, to be an advisor, a counselor, not a master. And this quotation really reminds me of something that one of my teaching mentors said to me the other day. And I'm very glad he's still here. I think he's still here. Yes, James Wishart. On the phone the other day, you said to me, and it really, really stuck with me. I was asking you about teaching, and James has a background mainly in Steiner education, but mainstream education as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, James. But you said it's not just the parents that place the trust in you as the teacher to sort of teach them their child, but it is the child's higher self placing trust in you as well. And that really stuck with me. And I think it's this kind of talk about education and teaching. I think it's applicable to all of us as human beings because, even if you're not a teacher and you don't have, even if right now you don't have children, so you're not that involved in schools, there will be times in your life where you're called upon to teach and you're made responsible for a moment, whether you like it or not. And I know, for instance, in the TS here in Australia, I see Leo as one of my teachers. And Leo, you don't have a teaching degree and you don't sort of stand there as I'm not sitting in a classroom, you're not lecturing me, but you are a form of a teacher to me and a form of a guide. And I think you do exactly this. You don't impose your own. You sort of help this unfoldment. Um, and I don't know, I think it would be maybe a good moment to pause. I don't know if anyone sort of wanted to reflect on maybe a moment where they felt that they were put in a position as a teacher, and maybe they thought, did you do a good job? Maybe not a so good job in that moment, but yeah, did anyone want to share, I suppose, a moment where they were called upon to teach, if anything does spring to mind, and how you handled that as well? Because it's a funny thing, we always talk about students and teachers, but I think what I'm trying to get at through this presentation is that school doesn't really end at school. Yes, Saga, I would love to hear from you.
So 7 or 8 years ago, when I did my yoga training, I was beginning to travel aimlessly and started doing my yoga certifications. And then I was working with an organization, a hospital, a naturopathy hospital, way back in 2017. I used to have a senior teacher as well. So suddenly I find myself uh, preparing to teach meditation, which I was not really expecting to do. So my senior teacher asked me, Sagar, you're supposed to teach meditation today. I was totally um, silent for a while. Not, I didn't know how to react to that, and should I really accept that responsibility, or should I just say no? I cannot do that. But something within me didn't say no. And that evening, it was a half an hour meditation, which I led for the first time, just after 6 months starting to practice yoga and meditations. Um, it was something really did it for me. It felt like I was not doing it. I was not really leading that session. And I remember there were 25 people in that whole session, and I was really nervous when I entered the hall. But yes, it just happened. And
Mm. Oh, I think you went on mute.
So I had a moment of silence after everybody left the hall. In that silence, I had a few tears in my eyes. I said, "How did this happen?" So yes, when there is a call, something makes us do, makes
Mm.
us make the action.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing. And yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, that the comment, you felt like it wasn't you, even though it was. Yeah. J James, sorry, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, what was the original question you asked again? Just so I'm...
Yeah, so I did ask, has there been a moment in time where you felt a call to teach, or maybe someone's asked you to explain something to them and you found yourself in a position of needing to be the teacher in that moment, so to speak. And how did you handle that?
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of times in school I was quite a mischievous child, but yeah, I disrupted the class a lot, but like not out of bad intentions, but because the learning environment wasn't speaking to the soul and it wasn't stimulating. Yeah, and I guess when the teacher was presenting in a very lifeless and mechanical manner, just speaking the same words on the lecture slides and just continuing. I guess I instinctively just started to misbehave and started to stir things. And then I guess that's teaching like a need for meaning and um, more real engagement from the teacher. And like I guess that's a good way to show the teacher that um, yeah, it needs to be improved.
Mm. So it sounds like maybe in the classroom, in those positions when you're a student, you're sort of looking for something a bit deeper, maybe the why rather than the how. And do you find that in your life as well? That's sort of how you go about life, or was that sort of
Um,
contained to the class?
necessarily more just like just a lot less lifeless. It just needed more something, it just needed more life. And yeah, I guess the lack of that sort of caused a bit of chaos, and chaos insights change and lessons. So yeah, I'll let someone else speak.
Yeah, I think Leo, you had your hand up first, and then Marique and Fatima.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of moments that I was put in a situation that somebody asked for advice or they asked me to explain something. I think I handle the situation really well, but the receiver did not handle my answers really well. Because to me, somehow my way of communication is quite direct. I don't like to beat around the bush, and I would just say that, well, as you always hearing me saying, Ellie, if there's something that people hasn't learned a lesson, maybe because they haven't suffered enough. No, no matter what we do, from that person, from them, they need to realize that shit, this is wrong. And then they will start to take actions. So, but there will be some situations that I was put in a situation where I need to explain something and I realize that, yes, maybe I can mold the answers a little bit different so they will take it better. And actually, in those situations, I was not a teacher, I was a student myself as well. So when those opportunity arise, I feel like both the asker and the receiver, both of them are teacher to each other and student to each other. And the real teacher is always life.
Yeah, it's interesting, that paradox, isn't it? And I think you're onto something there. Marique, did you have something to say, or Fatima?
Ah, yes, yes. So it's an interesting that my life has put me like several positions where I have been asked to teach somebody. Mostly like like mathematics or physics or some subject, also some painting. But and I remember that I think most of the students, like all of the students, came to me somehow. Somebody suggested, and I never like really looked them. But if somebody comes, I always take them, and sometimes it's this relationship is like a few years until they graduate and so on. And I remember when I finished school, I was thinking I will never ever. I didn't like very much my chemistry, the way the chemistry teacher was teaching, but she was like a lovely lady herself. And I was thinking I will never have nothing to do with the chemistry, but then somebody came and they need this chemistry. So I opened the book, and I learned it for them again. And so never say never. That's one thing. And the other thing is about the theosophical teachings that I remember I gave a talk about one time Tao Te Ching, I think, yeah, Lao Tse. And it was about maybe a year or a few later, we were talking something and I had a problem and somebody quoted something that she remembered from my lecture that at that moment I didn't remember. And I was like, this was so beautiful. This thing is coming back to you. But also in the philosophical lectures, I always feel that if you really try to teach something that others would benefit, then later you will like very brightly will remember that, and it's like a treasure for you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, and very interesting how sort of your own teachings came back to you in that way, sort of being quoted back and yeah, thank you. Francis, did you want to share?
Yes, I do. So, I think there were many times that I was asked to explain, I wouldn't say teach, but explain about things. And then I think like what Leo says, there are times that we could give answers and people turn out to reject whatever is given. And then over the years, I start to realize is that out of all those situations I have never known what they actually want. I thought I knew what they want. And then in the end, I start to ask questions like, what about this do you want to know? Right? Or what about this you have already known? And what are the things, what are the gaps that you're looking for and stuff? I just keep asking the questions to the point that somehow there are times that they would actually know the answers themselves. I'm not teaching anyways, right? Then there was when like I think a few months back, Simon was telling us during the study class. He mentioned that education, the word education is a Latin. It comes from Latin, like it means like to draw out, right? It's not so much about like it's not to put something external into someone else. It's more like we let the learner, we draw something from the learner. And as like what you have mentioned as well, that is really what the higher self has placed the trust in.
Yeah, I was going to expand on that as well, Francis. I think
that's great. Yeah.
when we teach and we teach from the mind instead of the heart, so the mind is, being more intellectual and just remembering things that are remembered but not actually known or in a knowing. But when things are taught from the heart, like from proper experience and not just from recited words, I think that's when memory is a lot stronger. And I think that's one of the biggest joys of teaching is, when someone else remembers something you've taught. It's very powerful and very, yeah.
No, I really love that. Yeah. Yeah, and I know in Steiner education he talks about the head, the heart, and the hands as well. And sort of that balance between all three. Thanks for that, both Francis and James. And Angelo, I saw you had your hand up at some point. Did you still have your hand up?
No, I just wanted to to reflect a little bit on what James and Leo were saying. I think that sometimes our biggest teachers are those who challenge us the most. Like, for example, James was being a little bit, like naughty at the class, but at the same time, that naughtiness was teaching something to the teacher. And I think that's very, very good. And probably I just reflect on my life that probably the people I have learned the most is those who actually say to me, who has the courage to say sometimes, no, it's not like that. It's in this way and you are wrong. And it may not be a teacher at all. It may be actually your enemy, the person you don't like at all, but it becomes the biggest teacher. That's all. Like when they were talking, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, Angela. And I think that's really at the heart of this presentation today because, when we often talk about teachers, students, learning, the stereotypical image comes to mind of this, boxed classroom with desks and a chalkboard and someone delivering a lesson. But education is really not confined in this way, and there are teachers everywhere and students everywhere and lessons everywhere as well. And I think there's something in that challenge can sometimes be those really potent and powerful lessons. Now, the other quotation that I have from Annie Besant here is she's got down, and this is from the Case for India, so it was actually a little bit more ideological, talking about English ideology being pushed into India, and I've had to cut a little bit of that back so sort of would fit on the slide. But she says here, and I think it's a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a caution here, is that the education department controls the education given, and it aims to make docile government servants rather than patriotic citizens. High spirits, courage, self-respect are not encouraged, and docility is regarded as the most precious quality in the student. And it's always important, I think, to be aware of the wider actors and agendas going on. Because again, when we tend to think of education, we really tend to think about what it's like on the ground, our lived experience. But if you kind of zoom out a little bit, and there's layers to this, you can zoom out completely. But if you just zoom out a little bit, sort of something that I can tell you, and I've been researching this a little bit and currently writing a paper with some colleagues about this, is that we have all these actors who are really interested at the moment in education, and some of them may actually surprise you. So, for instance, the World Bank, very interested in education. Major technology companies, very interested at the moment. The OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, very interested in education, and they all have very quickly become stakeholders in education. And so why? Why would the World Bank or the OECD care about, our little classrooms? And there's a few reasons, and some of them are good. And I don't think, sometimes it's not a good thing to say this is good and this is bad, but I think it's just to be aware of. The sort of two major reasons why all these actors are at play globally at the moment is political and economic. So if you control the way education is delivered, you can push your own political agendas, your own ideological agendas in a way that suit you. And number two, you can make a lot of money. So for instance, in Australia, the last time I checked, education was our fourth biggest export. So I think it was like natural gas number one, coal number two, iron ore, and then education. So that's really interesting and fascinating, isn't it, when you start thinking about it in that way? And I think the exports, the economic number last year that Australia generated was $51.5 billion for our economy. So yeah, it's interesting to be aware of. And what does this actually mean and look like? What does it mean when I talk about exports, and why is this a concern? So, I mean, I could give so many examples. There's one example where the OECD runs something, and you may have heard of it. It's called PISA tests. So PISA stands for the Program for International Student Assessment. And 79 countries have signed up to this. Australia takes part, Singapore takes part, the Philippines take part. Philippines signed up in 2018, actually. So it's this growing thing where countries are signing up to it. And basically what they do is that each country runs a test and they measure every 15-year-old's ability in the country on three things: the reading, mathematics, and science. And so it gets all these average scores from each country, and then it ranks all the countries according to the 15-year-old's ability. And so, for instance, Singapore, if you go really well on the test and, say Singapore is quite high up there, which I think it actually is, what does this actually mean? Well, it means that when international students are looking around, or parents of international students are looking around saying, where do I want my child to be educated? Where are they going to get a good, high quality education? They go to something like PISA and say, oh, look, Singapore is ranked quite high on this PISA test. I'm going to send my child here. And yeah, great for Singapore. They get some money for that child coming into the country, paying for the education. Same thing in organizations. If training programs are going on and they're looking around, you have employees, you want to train them, you're a CEO of a company, where are you going to go to find out where your employees get an education? You go to things like the PISA test and look at, oh, Singapore, yeah, they're good. Let's send our employees there. Again, wonderful. Singapore makes money. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some really good things about this model. But I just basically am bringing it up, and there's so many more examples I could bring up. But I just think it's good to be aware of, because what does it measure again? Let's just go back. Reading, mathematics, and science. And there's this saying in education, and I don't believe it's attributed to one single person, it's just a phrase, but we measure what we value. So what are we measuring? Reading, mathematics, and science. So what do we value? Reading, mathematics, and science. But what about art? What about languages? What about dance, philosophy, history, religion? And, if we go back a slide here, what is it Blavatsky said are the most important aspects of education? Self-reliance, love, altruism, free men and women. I'm not seeing those values in this PISA test. So yeah, it's just something sort of to think about, and I think sort of hits home with what Annie Besant is saying, that, there are actors and agendas at play, and it's just good to be aware of these things. And now I know I've spoken, I've gone on a little bit of a rampage about the OECD, which I do tend to do. But I thought we'd just take it a little bit back on the ground, and just take a moment, and we might save this to the end for discussion. But I just sort of want everyone in the next, as I'm talking, to start thinking about, well, what would their ideal education be if you could be an architect and design a school and, employ all the teachers, design the curriculum? What would you want that to look like? And yeah, I think we can talk about that a little bit at the end. And there's this slide here as well, which has 3 faces and 3 names here. And they ask themselves that same question that I just asked you. What is an ideal education system? How do we ideally educate? And the interesting thing about these 3 names and faces is that, the last couple of slides, we had Blavatsky and Annie Besant, which we as Theosophists are all quite familiar with. But these 3 faces are actually known really widely in education. So in my university, the students and professors in the Faculty of Education, they don't, you know, most of them wouldn't know who Annie Besant is, but oh, Maria Montessori, oh, they know that name. Krishnamurti, they know that name. Rudolf Steiner, they know that name. And these three people were definitely connected to the TS as well. And some of you, probably much more than I could talk about their connections as well, but I can give a little bit of a rundown. And I suppose maybe we'll start with Krishnamurti. And as you probably know, a lot of education has sort of come out of his teachings, his lectures, his thought. And I have down a quotation. It's not on the slide, but I've just got it here on my phone. And he says, the purpose of education is to bring about freedom, love, the flowering of goodness, and the complete transformation of society. And so that's really interesting. And I think sort of links back in with the other slides quite nicely as well. And on the right here, we have Rudolf Steiner, sometimes a little bit of a more controversial figure in the TS. Personally, I'm actually really indebted to Rudolf Steiner and his teachings about education. In the city I live in, we have a Steiner school, and I've been able to spend a fair bit of time there and speaking to teachers there. So that's informed a lot of my worldview and how I do view education. And he did split from the Theosophical Society, and he's better known for anthroposophy, but he was always quite fond of Blavatsky and her writings. You know, there was potentially other personality clashes in the TS, but he always sort of maintained Blavatsky in his ethos as well. And the Waldorf School movement is a global phenomenon, and it's rising each day. Steiner is famous for many things he said about education, but one of my favorite quotes of his is that you will not be good teachers if you focus only on what you do and not upon who you are. And yeah, isn't that, oh, that just hits home for me. It's quite similar to another famous saying by Parker Palmer, who's this more modern figure in education, who says, you teach who you are. And, you know, because yes, you might have a curriculum and lesson plan and be able to stand in front of a classroom explaining how to do algebra. But is it really algebra what you were teaching in that moment? Yes and no. Sure, you might be teaching algebra, but underneath that, you're demonstrating who you are, the way in which you teach algebra, and how you explain it, how you respond to students' disruptive behavior when you're trying to teach, or their questions around it. It really says something about you as a person. And I think I mentioned before, actually, James brought up the heart. So yeah, Steiner was very much about head, the intellectual work, the heart, the feeling, and the hands, the doing. And sometimes when you have different ages in the classroom, you need to sort of change that up a little bit. Sometimes the little ones, they might not be able to do as much head work. They need a bit more doing, a bit more heart work. But I think it's something to sort of keep in mind for all of us, that we should try to be balanced within all those three things. And I think sometimes in the TS, we spend a lot of time studying, and it's wonderful, and we're so into philosophy and science. But I find we talk about it a lot. But there's moments sometimes where I'm like, are we actually doing it? Are we actually embodying it? And I think there's maybe something that we could learn from that as well. And I've always I found it interesting. I sort of wanted to bring this up, but I didn't know where to put it. But I always found it really interesting, the word pupil, how it's, you know, a pupil in your eye, but it's also pupil means a student. And comparing this as well with the word discipline. So discipline comes from the same etymological root as the word disciple, as well. And so we talk a lot about discipline in schools, like, oh, you're being naughty. Go to the naughty quarter. Detention, James. Time out. You need to be disciplined. But when you really think about it, discipline can only actually ever come through love, just as disciples can only come through love. And love of whom? Love of your teacher. love of a teacher. That teacher could even be your higher self, I suppose. And so in that moment of discipline, you're seeing yourself in the eyes of a teacher, their pupil. You see yourself in the eye of the pupil so that you can begin to see yourself as a person who is loved for the very best in you, your higher self. There is a teacher who can look at you and see you. And how beautiful is that? Have you ever experienced something like that? Ever truly felt seen? And imagine if we could imitate that sort of higher feeling just a little bit, to do that for each other and our children and in the classroom and in life too. And this third image as well, of course, I don't want to forget Maria Montessori. So like Waldorf schools, Maria Montessori schools are a global phenomenon. She was the first woman in Italy to graduate with a medicine degree, and was a very holistic and open-minded being. And she actually went to hear Annie Besant speak in 1907. And she was always very open-minded to Theosophy. And in particular, Montessori wanted to build an educational model for all children, so especially those who were neurodiverse or had disabilities. She really thought education could be achieved by all, and everyone had a right to education. And some of the people she met at the Theosophical lecture actually ended up being some of her individual donors. So the TS as an entity didn't fund the Montessori movement, but people within the TS were individual donors of that school movement. And later on in her life, she visited Adya by personal invitation of the international president at the time, and she conducted Montessori school training as well. So yeah, we're probably all getting a bit tired of me talking so much, and it is getting a little bit late, so I'll leave it here. But I did just want to end on that we all will receive an education. We all are receiving an education. Even for those who never step foot in a formal school, they are getting an education. And schools, in my mind, are there to mimic what this earth is, which is a way to learn. And I often ask myself, but how do you know if you've learned a lesson? If you've really truly learnt it? Because you can intellectually know something and you can mull it over in your brain and be able to articulate it with finesse. But does that mean you actually know it? Because I don't know about you guys, but have you ever been in a situation where you know what you're doing isn't the right thing, but you're doing it anyway? For instance, if you're gossiping about someone and you sort of get caught up in the moment, and there's a part of you in the back of your head saying, "Oh, like you shouldn't really be doing that. You know better." But do you actually know better because you're doing it? And so in my mind, I think that we truly know our lessons when we embody them, and when we're actually, yeah, completely embodying them with our head, our heart, our hands, our whole being, our whole self. And that's how you truly show that you know your values and show that you know your lessons. And education is always going to be there. And teaching is worth thinking about, learning is worth thinking about. And I just did want to end on that. I always found it really interesting when we think of figures like Buddha and Christ, and the way we speak about them. We don't call them world intellectuals, although of course they are in a sense. We don't call them world scientists, though they can be in a sense. But what do we call them? We call them world teachers. And I think that's because education really is at the heart of all things. But thank you so much for listening to me. I've got a couple of questions here if we had time for a discussion. I'm not sure what the timeline and everything is like, but yeah, if anyone wanted to share anything or talk about a question or had a comment, anything at all.
I think we have like 15, 20 minutes more for discussion. So
Oh, good.
read the questions, and if anyone feel resonates with any kind of question here, please share with us.
Yeah, I had some of these guiding ones, which I'm interested in myself. But yeah, also if there was something you felt you wanted to say during the talk that you didn't get a moment to share as well. yes, open it up to you guys.
I guess I got a question for you, Ellie.
Hmm.
What is your, it's a very broad question, but what's your vision for, let's say, in the next 5, 10 years of what the education system is going to be like? Is it going to change um, into a more holistic framework, or is it going to sort of stay the same as it is now? What's your...
My sort of intuitive thinking is that it's going to have to change because it's not working. And even on such a level of we are having global teacher shortages. In Australia, even the private schools are finding it difficult to source teachers. I forget the exact statistic, but I think it's like over 50% of teachers leave within the first 5 years of the profession. Um, Students aren't enjoying it. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of behavioral problems. I have a feeling it's probably going to tend to push a little bit more how it's going until it breaks. And then hopefully we can arise from the ashes. We can pull together these ethos and strings that we know are working and sort of build anew. That's sort of how I kind of see things playing out.
What's your view on artificial intelligence and how that's going to affect teaching in the future?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, AI is there, and I think we do kind of have to accept that. And I think that there's two modes of thought. Some people are wanting to go really back to a traditional way of, all right, we're going to go back to pen and paper and have in-class tests and, so the teacher can watch and make sure no one's using AI. There's another strain of thought of, well, how do we incorporate this? How do we sort of go with the flow, so to speak? And,
To a question
maybe,
sorry, yeah. So
yeah,
you've
you go.
studied at the Steiner School, and if you've taught there as well a little bit, like some...
I've done a prac there, and actually we've got in our audience some teachers who have worked there for a very long time too. So James and Rita, if you want to try and chime in about Steiner and your thoughts as
What's
well.
what do you say is the best way to utilize AI and go with it as well? Like in terms of a Steiner School, for example, like what's the best way you could utilize AI and make it
Uh,
pure as possible?
yeah, I think it's interesting, especially in Steiner, because it's my understanding that especially in the primary years, which I think I tend to agree with, they don't really have computers or technology that much in the classroom. Um, And so it is really, really more about a doing environment. But I could be wrong. Rita and James and Susan can probably speak to that much more than I can. But I think in terms of personally, how do we go with things? I think that things need to become more local, and we need to really get back down to our communities, because if you're doing a research project on your local community, yes, AI can help you with aspects of that. And I think it's really useful for AI to be able to help with aspects of that. But it can't actually go know your community as well as or be there and interview within your community and do things like the agriculture in the community and the jobs. And so I think if we have more locally focused projects with the openness to AI to help assist that, I think it would be great, because it teaches people how to use AI in a way that's more for their methods and how to go about things rather than doing something for them. And then at the same time, they get more involved in the community.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that I feel drawn to the very first question because I always prioritize freedom. So I'm just curious, what do you guys think about the word freedom here? What does it mean by freedom in the context of education?
I see it as you are able to think and act in the way that you have the most affinities to. So you have the freedom to go towards something that you, whether you know it or not, are most, I guess, drawn to or have natural ability towards. So I guess the freedom to sort of choose and sort of go your own way and sort of figure out what's not right for you and what is right for you.
Yeah, I think as well, freedom to me, it always comes down to that aspect of free will. And I think when we talk about free will, it's, a lot of people would think, oh, free will is just doing whatever you want to do. But I think free will doesn't actually mean that. Free will is the opportunity to act in alignment with one's higher self. And I think that's such a wonderful thing, but also it's a struggle. But it's also what makes this life very special, and why this life is often this place is often referred to as a school, because it is one of these places where we don't necessarily have to align with our higher self. We can have the free will not to align as well, and that can cause some suffering. But it can also help teach lessons that need to be learned.
When I was talking about my experience of like being first in a school that was very disciplined, and then in another one that was more open for students to participate, I always thought that actually my experience, like in this school that was quite tough, was very good, because it set up my structure, like to be consistent and also like dedicate to something, like to focus on something and to achieve something, because that is also important. So when we speak about freedom, I think that we need to have like the basis to be able to thrive, but at the same time, in that freedom, you need to know yourself, to know where or what do you want to thrive into. So it's like you need a mix between the two things to be able to realize who you are and what you want. I think that realizing who you are is also difficult. You need good teachers and a good school and personal interest also to get there. So it's a mix of many things. But I always think that when you want to learn, you find the teacher. Like and you will find those places where you can learn specifically what you want in many different ways. So it's also about what you are looking and you have the interest to learn.
No, I like that. Yeah. Being sort of open to being taught as well.
Yeah, I think being guided rather than being forced in a way, and like, yeah, having your hand held throughout the way, but not being told everything. Gives you a bit of freedom to explore.
Ellie, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can, James. Yeah.
Can I just enter in, having a few technology problems here, but have been loving the discussion from all of you. I just wanted to maybe add in something that probably I'd say no educational technique is bad in itself or approach, but it comes down to when it's taught and how it's taught. And even the talk, even the the discussion before about rote learning, there's a time when rote learning is wonderful. There's a time when it's terrible. And so when we talk about these different faculties of a human being, there can be a particular time, developmental stage for the child when it's really appropriate to learn in a particular way. And I'm just wondering how many of you think back on your education and think back, towards the last few years in high school, for instance. But there's a different form of learning, if you like, in kindergarten and in primary school and in high school. And roughly speaking, going back to your point, Ellie, in kindergarten, we talk about the learning of the hands in Waldorf education, learning through the hands. In primary school, we talk about learning through the heart, and in high school, more learning through the head. So it's not really one or the other, but there is a progression as the child develops through these stages.
Is that in like the 7 year?
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And on that point, the modern trend to start schooling earlier and earlier doesn't really fit with these natural 7-year stages which Steiner talked about. Which is, that's another area for discussion too. When should we start learning and teaching in a formal sense?
Thanks for that, James. Yeah, I think it's as well sort of brings to mind the whole grade system, and we do have to acknowledge here on Earth that there's, I'm not graduated because I'm still here, right? But there is people of different grades who have learned sort of different lessons, and maybe sometimes we can't expect, if you're a year 11 student, you can't expect a kindergartner to be doing the exact same as you as well, and that's sort of why it's so important to be free of judgment. When you are in talking in about education, never to judge, full stop, but especially never to judge your student if you're in a teaching position, or if you're a student, maybe not judging your teacher as well.
I quite like a lot that we have different state, like moments to learn particular things as well. I think that that's so true, and that applies to life as well. Like there are things that you will not learn at certain point just because you are not ready for it. It's like you need to get that point where you will be open to learn, and then you get it. Even if you have people who want to teach you a specific thing, if you are not ready for it, it's like it doesn't go through you regardless.
James.
I was going to ask about the regulations in Australia for, I guess Australia, because we're talking about, is that sort of the regulations to starting like a non-government school, is it biased towards a certain way of education, which is sort of blocking a lot of potential spiritual growth that could be happening in schools?
The regulations, if you're a student or a teacher, or just the school in
So
general.
like if you want to start at like an alternative school and there's all these regulations that you need to adhere to for starting a school,
Starting school.
that potentially blocking a lot of positive things, that new ideas or new spiritual aspects of learning that they've sort of left out and not included in the legislation.
Yeah, no, I think actually James and I were talking about this a little while ago, and we have in Canberra anyway, each state and territory in Australia has something slightly different. But in Canberra, for instance, we have the new schools policy that came in. I don't remember exactly what year. But it basically means it's very difficult to start a school that's not a mainstream school. And my feeling is that if had Rita and Co, because Rita was actually one of the founding members of our Steiner School in Canberra, had they not started that before that new schools policy had come in, then we probably wouldn't have a Waldorf school in Canberra. We used to have a school as well in Canberra called School Without Walls, and it was, there was no principal there. It was just teacher run. Students had a lot of a say. That ended up I don't know if it was shut down or sort of closed down of its own accord. But yeah, sort of starting these alternative schooling ways is basically illegal, or if not illegal, very, very difficult to do so. And so it does sort of raise these questions of, oh, why? And why is there one particular way of knowledge that's being pushed so much that others are being squashed out a little bit?
That is a problem.
It's a very good discussion, and maybe last question or last comments before we close this session, Ellie?
Yeah. Anyone have anything last they jump in out of their skin to say? And thank you as well for letting me do this presentation. It's been lovely to share the space with you all.
Well, I think this is a very interesting presentation, because I think that I graduated from school years ago, but I just realized that I will never be graduating. Life is the biggest school compared to high school, secondary school.
Yes,
And then
yes.
I think that the people who cause a lot of problems to me are the greatest teachers in my life. And I think that's so yeah. Well, unless anybody else want to share anything before we close the session.
I think that was a wonderful talk. It flowed very nicely. Had good engagement.
Thanks so much.
Timing was great. And yeah, it was good that you were able to sort of take us back and really think about, childhood and school. It's been a while since I've thought about school, and yeah, it was good to go back and reflect on something meaningful.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. I hope everyone has a very lovely night and enjoys either going to sleep or getting ready for bed or whatever time it is, wherever you are.
So thank you so much, Ellie, for being our guest speaker for this time and for this topic. So maybe now we can conclude the 5th Indo-Pacific Online Youth Gathering, and we will see you again next month in July. And our next guest speaker is gonna be James with a very interesting topic as well. Is that mystic or mystical poems, James?
Yes, it's called Mystical Poems, and the title will be called Verses of the Veil.
Very good. Okay, I'll get more information for you guys. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I'll see you next time. All right. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.